Well, good evening and welcome to today's information session. I am Dr. Jennifer Lewis, Director of Education with the North Carolina Board of Nursing, and I, along with my colleagues, Dr. Terry Ward and Anne Marie Milner, welcome you and are pleased that you joined us for today's session. We hope that it will be informative to you, and we are looking forward to entertaining any questions that you might have as we move along in the presentation. So, the goal of today's webinar is really to provide you more information about proposed amendments to rule language that had previously come before the board. We knew that there were a lot of questions out there about some of the proposed language, and we wanted to give our stakeholders an opportunity to receive clarification. And so that's the goal of these webinars, is to really engage with you, have some dialogue with you, and again, answer any questions that you might have with regards to that proposed language. I should say that as we move along in today's presentation, there are a couple of things that we need to make you aware of. The recording has started. I think everyone saw the prompt on that. But also, we want to make you aware that the information being provided today is not information that's in effect. So, the rule language that we're going to talk about today is not currently enacted by the board, meaning that we are not holding any programs to the standards as they'll be presented today. And that's really important for you to know. But as such, because we're talking about hypotheticals, it's important that we not disseminate or broadly disseminate this information as it's subject to change. As we go through today's presentation, I do encourage you all to submit questions. You can do that either through the Q&A feature or the chat feature, and we will be responsive to those towards the end of the presentation. However, if you think of something after today's presentation, feel free to reach out to us at the email address on the screen, lawsrules@ncbon.com, and we will certainly try to be responsive to those questions. So I'd like to start presentations by reminding us all about the board and the mission of the North Carolina Board of Nursing. Because as nurses, we engage with patients. We are charged to provide care and make sure that we are doing the absolute best that we can. To do that, it means that we have to take ownership of our practice. And the board's mission is one of public protection. So we are charged as a regulatory body to make sure that the nurses out there are providing safe and competent practice. And that includes the regulation of pre-licensure nursing programs, so that the minimum standards that are set by the board are done so with that public protection mission in mind. And I think that as we go through the presentation today, you'll find that our mission is forefront in all of the proposed language that we'll present to you. So at this point, I'm going to ask my colleague, Dr. Terry Ward, to share some information about you, about some of the proposed language. Dr. Ward?
Thank you so very much, Dr. Lewis. I am Terry Ward, and I am an education consultant here at the Board of Nursing. And what's interesting for me this week is my 3rd-year anniversary at the board is coming up on August 3rd. And this time has truly, truly flown by for me. And one of the things that I enjoy most about my role is the fact that I get to help you all have a deeper understanding of administrative law and rule. And it's just very important to me that you all understand the background and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. During my presentation, I'm going to discuss for you two very important rules. Now, the rules that I'm going to discuss already exist, and I'm going to talk to you about the background information that led to the proposed changes for these rules. And you probably have heard about it already, but the key takeaway is what Dr. Lewis said. This is for information only. The proposed change rules have not been adopted. So let's get started at that point. So I want to start the conversation about rules with rule number 36.320 students. And this is very interesting to me because learning these rules, one of the first things you ask yourself is, why is information about NCLEX pass rates in a student's rule? Well, that information is located there because it's considered a student outcome. So that is the best place to categorize this information. But in this rule, that's where you're going to find information about the pass rate standards. It's located in the students rule. And that is what I'm going to highlight for you today in the students rule. Uh, this is outcome related. And again, it's because it's outcome related, it's in the students rule. Now, I really didn't understand that until I started working at the board. So it's just really important that you understand that. And then within that rule, it's in 36.0320E. And E is what tells you about the current rule regarding NCLEX passing standards. So in a nutshell, it just kind of states this. It says that the nursing program is going to maintain an NCLEX pass rate that either meets or exceeds the national pass rate for testers on the first attempt. In a nutshell, it says that these results are going to be captured from January 1st through December 31st of each calendar year. In a nutshell, it says a nursing program shall maintain a 3-year average at or above 95% of the national pass rate. So once we put that rule out there, we've monitored that rule, we've looked at programs for compliance, and non-compliance has been found. So we took an extensive review of the literature. We looked at that review, and what that review revealed for us is that next gen NCLEX was coming. The clinical judgment model was out there, and it was going to impact pass rates. We knew what nursing programs had been through related to COVID, and the pandemic had impacted students' learning immensely. So we thought that that would impact it. We also take into consideration the fact that the board's mission is to protect the health of the public. So that being said, we really took all of those things into consideration and really thought about whether it would negatively impact our programs, our public, if we change the standard. So because we thought it was needed for all the reasons I mentioned before, we proposed a revision to rule language. And basically, the proposed revision only said we're going to reduce the benchmark to 90%. And that was beneficial because it would decrease what are lingering effects of single year low NCLEX. It would decrease the effect of the nuances caused by COVID and the change in the testing model. So what we have done is just identified or proposed a new way, with the old way being 95% 3-year national average, and the new way being 90% single year average. Now, if this proposed change is implemented, there are going to be implications for non-compliance with this rule. And so it has impacts on changes that we will make to other rules. Specifically, in this case, it has an impact on the program's process for closure, and that is in rule number 36.0309. So let's talk about that next. So this rule reference is this is where we talk about the process for program closure. And this rule basically just details or provides for program directors and nursing faculty information regarding the requirements for reporting program closures to include the date when it's going to happen, how students are going to be managed, how graduate records are going to be managed, basically the logistical information. There are 3 types of program closure that can occur. That's a voluntary, involuntary, and default. Voluntary closure is deemed necessary by the program. They decide that they need to close and they make the decision. Involuntary closure is led by the board and related to noncompliance with administrative law and rule. And default closure is when a program is closed because it has not had enrollment for 2 years or more. So, if for some reason the board takes action and they implement involuntary closure, there are just some things that the board has to do. Number one, the board has to collect the measures and the evidence related to the noncompliance. The board has to give written notice to the program. The board has to allow the program the opportunity to request a hearing. And the board has to allow 6 months from the date of the notice of actual closure to occur. Now, I want to note that if this proposed change to the rules is approved, notice of closure related to noncompliance with NCLEX pass rates would not occur until NCLEX pass rates have been fully assessed, meaning from January to December of the year, data would be collected, and then it would be the following year before the report of that data is released, meaning that nothing will be done as immediately. Due process has to occur. Remember, this is done again at the beginning of each year. And what we hope we've established a reputation for is making sure that our program directors don't get to this point without having the opportunity to consult and work with us and be assisted through the process. Nothing is going to happen in regard to program closure without due diligence and due process. So we've reached the end of this section of information related to NCLEX pass rates and standards and notice of program closure. I'd like to thank you for your time and attention, and I am now going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Milner.
Thanks, Dr. Ward. I'm Anne-Marie Milner, and I've been with the board. I'm the newbie since October, so I rely on my colleagues a lot for some information and guidance. But I am going to talk to you about accreditation and full-time faculty. So initial accreditation involves some cost. It's time-consuming, requires extra work, and can be stressful for the faculty, director, and administration. Well, I think I really sold that, so it makes everybody want to run out and seek accreditation now, huh? But truly, why accreditation? Organizations that invest in achieving the accreditation show their commitment to the nursing program. It maintains a high quality. And faculty and directors will realize that while they're writing the self-study and matching the standards that putting the information down for every standard that they have, they're also going to be relaying that to the Board of Nursing because our rules really align with the standards of accreditation bodies. So you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone, maybe. You can make sure that you're in compliance with your standards and for the chosen ASIN accreditation or NLN, whatever one you choose. So you're in compliance with that, and you're also in compliance with the Board of Nursing. So that makes it 2 good things. So you may ask, who writes the self-study? Well, this would be the faculty and the director. They will address all the standards, as I said earlier. This document is fluid, so when you maintain it consistently, the program can use this document as identifying strengths and areas that may need improvement. This is done early, and you'll be seeing trends early with your data from enrollment, retention, graduation rates, job placement. and licensure pass rates, everything that you need to know about your students. So seeing the data really early allows the faculty to make adjustments early to areas that need improvement. So informed quality improvements, and you have the data to back it up. But ultimately, accreditation is your commitment to the nursing program and the commitment to your community, where you will have those nurses go out and take care of everybody, and one day they'll be taking care of you too. So the next thing I have to talk about is full-time faculty. So the rule states that it's 35% or more we have full-time faculty. We know, like any other field, consistency is best. For example, your hairdresser, your car mechanic, and your nursing faculty. So we want to keep our nursing faculty the same. I know it's very hard, it's difficult, but consistent full-time faculty knows the curriculum. They know clinical, they know the facilities, they know the students, they know student evaluation and outcomes. So a national study found that the percentage of full-time faculty was a predictor of NCLEX success. So we all want that. We all want to meet that 95% 3-year or 90% 1 year, whatever comes. But I also know the struggles of finding qualified faculty that will stay in your program. I was a department head myself, and I dealt with these same struggles. It's very difficult to find and keep faculty. But we know you're doing the best you can, and that's all we can ask for. So we appreciate everything you do to educate our future nurses. And thank you for attending our webinar right now. And I'm going to send it back to Dr. Lewis.
Thank you, Dr. Milner. I appreciate you talking us through the proposed language for accreditation and full-time faculty, as well as Dr. Ward, who talked to us about the, the proposed NCLEX standard and the process for closure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about establishing a new nursing program in North Carolina and the proposed amendments around that rule language. And I just want to put it into context. We know that there's been a lot of discussion in recent months and actually over the last couple of years about the healthcare workforce. And there's been a lot of attention on nursing in particular. Here at the board, we have seen an increase, a significant increase, more than 10% over the last 3 years, an increase in the number of new programs that are established in the great state of North Carolina. And we're excited about that. We love having the opportunity to start new programs because we know that we're building our nursing workforce capacity. But there is a process to do that. And so it's important that our regulations, are such that the institutions that are wanting to establish new programs can do so with structure and rigor. And so the current rule language really highlights the need for the program director to submit an application to the Board of Nursing at least 6 months ahead of the proposed start date. And quite honestly, starting a nursing program has its nuances. It is challenging, and there is a lot of discussion that needs to occur between the program director at the institution and the Board of Nursing Education Consultants. And that takes time. It just simply takes time. Submitting the application and making sure that that application truly aligns with the established regulations is of utmost importance. And that requires several iterations of the document, but that's what we're here for. And so we want to make sure that the institutions have ample time to go through that process so that the resulting program is a quality program and is able to produce students that are not just successful on NCLEX, but are successful in their nursing careers. So the proposed amendments really highlight the need for that engagement with the institutions and the Board of Nursing to collaborate and make sure that the programs are sufficiently meeting the laws and rules. Therefore, we really found that it's really appropriate to extend that time for submission of an application by an additional 6 months. That gives us, the Board of Nursing and the institution, time to have that dialogue and make sure that everything is just so. It gives us time to come on site and perform an on-site survey visit, which is required as part of the process. And particularly if that institution is constructing new facilities, that time is needed to get those facilities to a point that is appropriate for the on-site survey to occur. Additionally, extending that time is going to give the program itself additional time to advertise and recruit students prior to the proposed start date for that program. And we all want the programs to have ample time to be able to recruit students, again, so that they can enter the wonderful world of nursing. And so I believe that brings us to the end of our presentation. We've highlighted just a couple of the proposed amendments that were in the previous rule language. Again, I appreciate your time and attention. We want to open it up for questions. If we have any in the chat and or the Q&A, we are certainly going to be responsive to those. But like I said earlier, if you think of something after the presentation, you can always reach out to us, email those questions, email feedback to lawsrules@ncbon.com.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. We have one question submitted via registrations received for today's webinar. That being, will programs be able to use 50% of time for simulated clinical at some point?
So if the proposed rule amendments are considered by the board, voted to go through the rulemaking process, and are approved as written, then the answer to that question is yes. Again, there's nothing under consideration at this point in time, but that would be the ideal situation. If that proposed amendment moves forward, then yes, programs would be able to go up to 50% simulated time.
Thank you. We have one additional question in the Q&A. Would more nursing programs be negatively impacted by changing to the 90% for a single year?
Thank you, Ms. Bodie. I'll be happy to address that question. So I want the audience to keep in mind that in doing our extensive review of NCLEX pass rate standards, one of the things we did was what I like to call hypothetical analysis, meaning we just basically took all of the current or from last year, we took all of those passing standards, whatever anybody's program had, and we calculated it by both numbers, 90 and 95%. And what we found is those programs, when we calculated on 90% in single year, programs were not negatively impacted. In fact, the programs, in a lot of cases, the programs did not have significant increases in their score, but it did make a difference. And then for those programs that weren't performing as well, it really didn't kind of what we call pad their standard. So basically, it was not changed in a major way.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. We have an additional question. Can you provide an example timeline for involuntary closure?
So, first of all, let me just say that Involuntary closure typically is something that the education consultant is working on and informing the program about. And there are situations where, in most cases, the programs know that this is evident or this is imminent, that their program is going to have to close. So I would say, from personal experience, if a program is at this point, what's going to happen is that we're going to have a conversation or discussion, and I'm going to consult and advise them, like my colleagues, to let's think about the students and let's think about what's best for the program, so we don't have to do an involuntary closure. We're going to do everything to not allow that to happen. But a timeline for involuntary closure, remember, involuntary closure could close for any reason. But I think what we should talk about is if our program is closed involuntarily because of NCLEX scores. So if your program is closed involuntarily because of NCLEX scores, think of it this way. January 2024, we start taking NCLEX all the way through December, and we don't do well. Then January of 2025, the program is going to be told you didn't do well and you need a plan to do better. And then January 2025 to December 2025, they're going to try to do better. And if they don't do better, we will have started having that conversation way back in July that you're not doing better. Let's talk about what your options are. So in that scenario, in that hypothesis, 2 years are going to go by before the program will receive notice of closure. But remember, that is hypothetical. In most cases, you're going to sit down with your education consultant and you're going to know that's where you are. But I promise you, we won't decide January 1 that your program is going to be closed, and we won't be knocking at the door on January the 2nd. And I can say that, and I'm not even a board member. I can say that, but I can say that.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. We do have another question. If the program is undergoing accreditation, what information should be provided to the board? Is there a need for a copy of the self-study report?
Great question. So anything that you submit to your accreditors, you're going to submit to us, and any response they give to you, you're going to submit to us. The self-study report, you're also going to submit that, and sometimes that will take the place of the 10-year survey. So you want to go ahead and send that to us, and we'll keep it in your file here.
Thank you, Dr. Milner. Can you clarify the proposed timeframe for submission of an application for a new program?
Absolutely. So as I stated before, right now, current language says that the application needs to be submitted at least 6 months prior to the proposed start date. The revised language, the proposed revised language, essentially moves that to a year prior to the proposed start date. And I would just remind us all that the institutions determine when they want to bring in their first class of students.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. I'm not seeing any additional questions in Q&A nor in chat. If there are any additional questions, if you can post those in the Q&A, and we'll be happy to respond to those. We have a comment in the chat. It is the board that determines closure of a program. And that is from Dr. Tillman, our CEO.
And I'd just like to say, while the webinar is geared towards providing information about the proposed amendments, feel free to ask any questions about current language as well.
What are the next steps for these rules to be approved?
Good question. So right now we're in an information gathering phase. We were directed by the board at the May board meeting to essentially put a pause on moving forward with proposed language so that we could reach back out to stakeholders and engage in dialogue, get feedback, and determine whether or not any additional amendments were needed to the rules. So once internally we have an opportunity to have those discussions, we'll make the decision about when and if the proposed amendments need to move forward to the board. So those final dates, I can't give you exactly, because while we're anticipating that, yes, eventually we will move forward, at what point in time is still up in the air. We want to make sure that we receive feedback from our interested parties and are responsive to that.
We also have another question. Possibly the individual is stating that she missed the information, but is there an updated date of completion for accreditation?
Well, the proposed rule was 2030, so that would be 7 years from now. But that, again, as Dr. Lewis said, it's a proposed rule. We're looking at everything, so we won't know until the rules are final.
We don't have any additional comments or questions at this time in the Q&A or comments in the chat. I spoke too soon. Can you explain the proposed amendments related to the precepted clinical experience?
I can jump in there. So I know that there have been some questions about this language. So let me just say the intent of the proposed language was not to be burdensome to programs whatsoever. Clinical experience, as we know, allow for the growth and development of students and really activate their learning so that they're able to apply the didactic learning. And we want to foster that. However, we did receive questions about whether or not those experiences that were not the focused client care experience or observational experience where we're going to require on-site faculty. The proposed rule language does require on-site faculty. However, it's the intent of the board to exclude precepted experiences. We explicitly stated observational experiences and the focused client care experience, but we recognize that precepted experience also is vital to the growth and maturation of our nursing students. So it's not the intent of the board to require on-site faculty for those precepted experiences. I hope that answers the question.
Any additional questions or comments at this time? I'm seeing none. Oh, that was just a comment stating thank you. Okay, you're very welcome. Any additional questions? We do have a comment. Fantastic job. Thank you. We appreciate that. And at this time, Dr. Lewis, there are no additional questions.
Okay. Well, we're going to give you some time back then. So we certainly appreciate your time and attention this evening and for your thoughtful questions. We hope that this session was informative to you. Again, if you think of something after we conclude today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Specific information or feedback, questions regarding the proposed amendments, definitely direct those to the email address previously stated, lawsrules@ncbon.com. If you've got questions about current language, you can certainly reach out to any member of the education department and we'll be responsive to you. All right. Thank you so much for attending. I hope you have a great evening.
Bye, everybody.